Hello and welcome to the Beyond Biotech podcast, and it's number 14 and it's going out on September the 16th. And this week we have a special theme. I'm Jim Cornell from Labiotech, and today is Malaysia Day and Independence Day in Mexico and also in Papua New Guinea. And it's also Guacamole Day, so make of that what you will. If July and August were a bit quiet this past week, more than made up for it. We couldn't keep up with all the news that was coming in, but it's a good problem to have. One embarrassing problem that I had this week was editing a photo. That's not normally a problem, as I've been using Photoshop since it was started, and I've even taught some courses on it, but this time I couldn't figure out why I could not delete or paint over some black dots in the corner of the image. After a few minutes of trying everything I could think of, including all the tools that there were, I realised that it was actually dirt on the screen. It's also been a busy week with interviews, setting them up and doing them. One day I had 3 meetings and 7 interviews, so my voice wasn't that great at the end of it. At least my son was happy because it stopped me singing. One of the reasons for doing so many interviews is that, of course, in a couple of weeks I'm headed to Sweden for NLS Days, so I'm trying to get a little bit ahead with the interviews, although it's not really working out as I planned. Maybe if there were more hours in the day. Speaking of which, my computer tells me every Monday morning, helpfully, how many hours a day I spent on screen on average, and it's usually quite a lot, as you can imagine. But this week there must have been a glitch in the system, because when it popped up, it said, "This week, your average daily screen time is 25.1 hours. And so to this week's theme. I already mentioned that I'll be at NLS Days, or Nordic Life Science Days, in Malmö, in Sweden, on September the 28th and 29th, and today we're taking a quick look at the event. We'll have an overview of the event with Managing Director Olivier Duchamp-Giudicelli, Chelsea Ranger, who's the Senior Advisor to SwedenBIO and Chair of NLSInvest, and we'll also talk to Magnus Björsne, CEO of AstraZeneca's BioVentureHub. Unrelated to NLS Days, we also have our weekly chat with global commercial real estate services company JLL with Travis McCready, and this week he's talking about the President Biden moonshot. And so that means we should run through some of the news you may have missed this week at Biotech.eu. I think we missed some too, there was so much of it. A cuffless device worn 24/7 can lower blood pressure. New predictive biomarkers are to be developed for larynx and hypopharynx carcinomas, and we had an article on the 5 hottest private biotechs in India. Ilia Pharma has partnered with the US Defense Department for a wound-healing drug. Arpeggio Biosciences raised $17 million in Series A funding to support its drug pipeline, and Star Pharma announced new data for its prostate cancer trial. A research charity in the UK is calling on scientists, engineers and technology experts to transform dialysis treatment. Himalaya Therapeutics published new data on its cancer treatment, and Aldatu has received a grant to develop a Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever test. Scope Biosciences and WUR in the Netherlands are hoping to improve CRISPR technology with some new funding. Enterome presented more data on its therapeutic cancer treatment, and Astellas, Seagen and Merck gave details on their urothelial cancer treatment. A treatment for adults with moderate to severe psoriasis has been approved by the FDA. We had an interesting look at how cyanobacteria and biotech might be able to help with the energy crisis, and the CHMP has recommended approval for a drug to prevent RSV disease in infants. Adva Biotechnology is using artificial intelligence to manufacture cell therapies. Novome Biotechnologies has raised $43.5 million for its therapeutically engineered microbes pipeline, and Spanish researchers have developed the Biotech to pool biological knowledge. Tridec One has raised $16 million to develop autoimmune disease candidates. A new company has been formed to boost the life sciences in Singapore, and also in Singapore, NTU has opened a microbiome research centre to study obesity and chronic diseases. A pancreatic cancer study using dual cell therapy has shown positive results. We had an article on the Bristol Science Creates Hub, and a collaboration is set to explore gene therapy products for neurodegenerative disorders. You can read all of these and many more at Labiotech.eu. And so let's get to NLS Days, or Nordic Life Science Days, to expand on the acronym. I'm looking forward to being in Sweden again, although I was a little disappointed this week when I went through my desk and found some Swedish currency in there, to the tune of about $40 worth of krona, only to realise that it's the old currency. I think the kind of money people will be talking about in Malmö might be a little more than $40 though, as it's one of the top partnering events in Europe. But rather than me talk about it, let's hear from the Managing Director of NLS Days, Olivier Duchamp-Giudicelli. Could you tell me a bit about NLS Days and SwedenBIO?
So actually, SwedenBIO is a Swedish life science industry organization, a member organization, non-profit based on a foundation. And the purpose of that organization is to gather members from different sectors in the life science ecosystem, being biotech, medtech, digital health companies, pharma, IP, law firms, services providers, CROs, etc., investors, to support the global life science community in Sweden. 10 years ago, we met and we got the opportunity to think about creating a networking platform in the Nordics, because at that time, there was no partnering events taking place on a regular basis in Sweden and in the Nordics in general. We discussed together with SwedenBIO and decided to create the first Nordic License Days, which took place in 2013 in Stockholm, gathering 600 people, mainly from Sweden, a few from the Nordics, from a handful of countries. And after 9 years, Nordic License Days is now the largest partnering platform for the life science sector in the Nordics. One of the top, I would say, 3 or 5 in Europe. If you go through the list of what is happening in Europe, you have BioEurope Spring, and then a couple of large international events. So it took place 5 years in a row in Stockholm, same place, just to establish the event and to consolidate it. And then we have started to move to Malmö from time to time to get a better connection with the Danish ecosystem. Actually, if we look at the Nordics, for us, it made sense to make sure that both Swedish and Danish ecosystem, which are the largest in the Nordics, were collaborating together. So being in Malmö with the bridge close to the conference venues was a good way to attract Danish participants, which worked actually. So since 2017, we have been in Stockholm and then in Malmö a few times. This year it's in Malmö. Next year we will celebrate the 10th anniversary in Copenhagen, Denmark. It's a way to get the Danish life science community really committed. And we also want people to think that it's a real Nordic event and not a Swedish one, because if it's always in Sweden, it doesn't make any sense. We know from our Norwegian and Finnish and Icelandic partners that of course, they would like to have NLS Days in their country, but if we look at the size of the event and the support that is required from the local authorities, I think that it will probably rotate in the future between Sweden and Denmark.
How has it evolved since it started?
We started with 600. And the last time we were in person, meaning in 2019, before the COVID hit, we have been able to put together 13 to 1400 people coming from 35, 40 different countries. So the event has been more and more seen as an international platform to meet with the Nordic companies. So people coming from the US, from Asia, from all over Europe, joining us every year to meet with the best of the Nordic life sciences. And the meeting is now very well attended by investors, big pharma representatives who are considering our platform as the best to scout and explore the Nordic life science sector.
And what can we look forward to this year?
A record number of exhibiting companies. We had to increase the exhibition floor twice. So we will have, if I look at the list of exhibiting organizations, we are close to 150. For the first time, we have gathered a nice number of country stands. So, for example, USA is for the first time showcasing at the NLS Days, as well as UK, Ireland, Lithuania, Spain, and of course, all the Nordic countries. So it's a first for us, a bit like Bio, having not only companies exhibiting, but also country pavilions representing a nation. A record number of sponsors this year as well. Huge interest from large firms, large pharma, banks, and services providers. And a record number of company presentations, because this year we have 2 presentation tracks, one dedicated to, I would say, regular companies, pharma, biotech, services providers, etc. And for the first time, an investment track where we have selected 40 Nordic companies ready for investment, seed or round 1, round A, Series A investment. And we will present these 40 pitches during the 2 days to the investors. And of course, these companies are also in the partnering, so they can get meetings with others.
And what's the benefit for those that will attend?
From the regular delegate perspective, I would say that if you are looking for collaborations, licensing, investment, sales, commercialization with a Nordic partner, this is probably the place to be. If you are a Nordic company looking for partnering with a pharma or investors, this is the place to be. If you want to promote your activities, products, or services to the Nordic life science community, this is the place also to be. So actually, this is the place to connect with the Nordics at many levels, being both science, technology, investment, services, sales, commercialization. We have company presentations. Of course, the partnering, the B2B meetings is really the core part of what we do for 2 days. But we have also a very interesting super sessions program and fireside chats program, where we have been trying to involve each of the Nordic countries on a specific topic, meaning like the strong topic for them, where they have some specific assets. For example, excluding the opening and the closing sessions, which are a bit more formal, Iceland has been given a super session on omics, so everything related to genomics, gene, cell therapies. Sweden will highlight what we call the sector convergence, how different industries are collaborating together for the benefit of the patients. So, for example, we'll have a session with AstraZeneca and Volvo talking together about life sciences. The Norwegian partners are hosting a session on vaccines and the cross-links between the vaccines technology and the COVID experience. Finland, we will talk about deep tech, data, everything related to artificial intelligence and quantum computing and everything they are good at. And Denmark, we have a very exciting session on gender science. So instead of talking about women's health like we do normally, we are talking about science for the other 50%. Because we know that most of the trials are done and made with males, without considering that medicine for women and men are different. So trials should be done also differently. Pharma and scientists will be talking about that specific aspect of the women's health. You can find, meaning on the website, many details on who will be speaking and like some kind of a resume of each session.
You mentioned the partnering. Obviously, that's the main part of the event. How does that work? Do people just kind of walk around and meet somebody, or is it mostly done in advance?
Yeah, so we give access to all registered participants to this partnering platform named One-on-One Partnering, the one that is used at the Bio Convention, for example. Since 15th of August, everyone has been given an access to the platform where they can fill up their company profile, what they are looking for, their assets, their services, their products. They can search among the directory of attendees. So you can either send meeting requests or receive meeting requests from others. These partnering sessions are involving, of course, every single people and companies attending NLS Days. So you have both company profiles and individual profiles. And the system is opened, like I said, 6 weeks prior to the conference. Time for preparing your meeting that will be taking place in person during the conference. So at NLS Days, we have hundreds of small partnering booths, and we will probably run something between 3,500 and 4,000 B2B meetings half an hour meetings during the conference. And these meetings will take place in person, face-to-face at the conference on the 28th and 29th of September. This is the main reason why people are attending. If we do post-event survey every year and we ask people, okay, why are you attending? And the first reason is partnering, the capacity of meeting and having face-to-face meeting with selected people and pre-scheduled meetings. That's very important.
Nice to be getting back together again instead of having to do everything online.
Yeah, meaning that's what we are feeling now, because of course we can see a huge interest of people registering and coming back. We did a digital event last year, which was nice, gathering 800 to 900 people, but it's not comparable at all with the in-person meeting. And if people had to complain about something about this digital event, that they were online every day at the office, having meetings with colleagues and clients and partners, and they wanted to be back face-to-face in person. Because at NLS Days also, we try to do things in the Nordic way. So the way we host the event, the way we design it, the way we recycle things, the way we serve very healthy food and nice food is different from other big events where food is and environment is like a secondary thing. Of course, we like people to have nice content, to have good meetings, but we want them to have it in a very nice environment. So they are in good shape to have good meetings.
Could you tell me about all of the logistical stuff like opening hours, that kind of thing?
We have a pre-event on the 27th hosted by our local partners, both Skåne and Copenhagen regions. It's networking event on the microbiome. It's a EU-funded project. But NLS Days starts officially on the 28th at 7 a.m. We open the exhibition until the 28th after the closing, where we give the Nordic Life Science Invest Awards to one of the 40 pre-selected startups. 6 super sessions, opening, closing, 5 fireside chats, probably 120 company presentations, partnering, receptions, a private dinner for investors the day before, exclusively open to investing companies, so they can talk about syndication and co-investment. Yeah, a lot of stuff on the table.
One interesting portion of NLS Days is NLSInvest, which is a pitching contest with 40 companies from around the Nordic countries. It takes part over the 2 days of the event, and to tell us what's involved is the chair of NLSInvest, Chelsea Ranger.
Just a generic question, if you could tell me about your role and what you do and a bit about NLSInvest.
Yeah, sure. So Chelsea Ranger, I have been working with SwedenBIO since 2019. I was first brought on as the program director in 2019. At that time, for that event, when I was first attending, my plan was to develop the program for 2020. So I spent a lot of time during the 2019 event interviewing a number of people, legacy attendees, investors, trying to understand what could we do better. What are we missing? What would you like to experience more of? And then, of course, we started planning the 2020 event, which was delayed due to COVID, and we ran it in 2021 as a digital event. So everything has been a bit skewed. So my role has transitioned a bit because NLSInvest was created during that time period. So it ran as a digital event in 2021, which of course had its own challenges. Didn't come to the full fruition of what we would have liked, but we selected 80 companies that were then given a special promotion to the investors that would be attending. Now I work as a senior advisor to the organization, and since NLSInvest will run for the live event this year for the first time, I've been chairing that process and the selection committee behind the applications we have received.
Has it traditionally been more Sweden or?
Yeah, no, that has definitely grown. I mean, typically when you see these events, they're run by event organizers, and this was created in 2013 by the industry organization SwedenBIO, which is the largest life science industry organization in the Nordics. Started out as a Stockholm-based, quite small event, few hundred people, but of course the need exists, right? So it has grown over time and manifested from being quite focused on Sweden and Denmark and quite focused on drug development, actually, to being representative of all 5 Nordic countries and all of the sectors that have a stake in the game when it comes to health and life science. We 5 Nordic countries very tightly share the commonality of strengths within science and technology, life science, of course, being included in that, but not limited. So it makes sense that we are speaking with one another and working together and seeing whether or not we can align our policies and regulations and data sources and lots of things where we can really create a centralized region that becomes a strength globally.
The pitching contest, is that new to NLS Days or has it existed before?
It is new. So this was based on the feedback that I mentioned from 2019. So the investors in particular were quite clear about things that they wanted to see happen with NLS Days. And one was, of course, we've always had a number of early stage biotechs and diagnostic companies, but they wanted to see more and a broader range of early stage companies in the pre-Series A framework, including academic groups. And the other thing that they requested was a private forum in which they could meet with other investment peers, which of course is of interest. We have a number of great investors across the Nordics, but broader syndication, of course, is something that we are all looking to achieve. So that spawned the idea of NLSInvest. And we started working on that for the digital event. I would say it's definitely taken a step up this year. I'm very excited to see what's going to happen. And we've hit some good milestones in the conference as a result.
What kind of companies are involved? How many are they from all of the participating Nordic countries?
Yes, so we've included all 5 Nordic countries. In fact, our team traveled over to Iceland. The team has also traveled to Finland. I'm based here in Norway, so we've really worked on creating a committee that would be responsible for marketing the fact that the event is going to happen and helping us to select the companies. So we have representatives from all 5 Nordic countries and from all sectors within health and life science so that we could have an adequate representation. So we've been accepting applications in a portal for all of this year. And we started our pre-selections of the companies in May and finalized those selections on the 31st of August. We received an astounding number of applications. It was great. And we selected 40, which was a very hard task. But the 40 are quite interesting companies. I mean, they really cross biotech, diagnostics, digital health, deep tech, deep learning, IoT, digital therapeutics, femtech. I mean, we've got lots. We've got a broad representation. Therapeutically speaking, we've also taken a look across the breadth because we've been speaking to a couple hundred investment firms over the past year. So we've really gotten an idea of what the strategies and interests of these investors are. So, of course, in the Nordics, we're very known for oncology, immunology, neurology. I mean, there's a number of areas where we have strengths. So we've obviously included those therapeutic areas, but we've also very heavily taken a look into cardiovascular, metabolic, infectious disease, both virology and bacteriology, microbiome, reproductive health, wasting disorders, mitochondrial diseases. So there's a nice breadth of representation.
So could you tell me how the companies were chosen?
Yeah, I think it's quite fun to mention how the selections were made. I think there's questions around that coming from some of the companies and unfortunately sometimes from those who were not accepted. But as I mentioned, and I'll just mention the names of who was on our selection committee because we had representatives from Turku in Finland, GU Ventures in Sweden, of course, within SwedenBIO, the Oslo Cancer Cluster and Life Science Cluster from Norway, Bioinnovation Institute and Danish Life Science Cluster, and Invest in Iceland. So all of these were responsible for reviewing applications. In terms of the criteria of companies we were looking for, of course, they should be pre-Series A. And we looked a lot at technology readiness levels. So this is from the KTH system. They have a TRL scoring process that takes a look at customer, technology, business, IP, team, and funding readiness. So we went as low as 3 on a score of 9, but we did evaluate everything above a 3. And then we took a look at the soft funding that companies have received as a stamp of validation. And of course, one of the things that I think is very important, particularly to the investors, is to really understand how the company describes the problem. Is it a real problem? Have they validated that it's a problem? What's the likelihood of implementation? If they develop something, it might be a great tool, but how likely is it to be bought and utilized within the system? So those were some of the things that we took a look at.
And so logistically, can you kind of run me through how the event's going to work?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that these 40 companies have received. So first of all, we requested for them to send us brief summaries and one-pagers, non-confidential one-pagers on their activities. So all of the investors attending, which we have more than 80 firms and more than 125 investors, they've all received a summary document and the one-pagers of all 40 companies. So they get that marketing material. They've received some training on how to handle partnering conferences, the etiquette in these brief 30-minute meetings. Also, they will be pitching on a center stage in the middle of the exhibition for everyone to hear. But the pitches are very short. They're 2.5 minutes. So that's a big challenge for the early stage entrepreneurs to be able to really get the message condensed and impactful. So they've received some pitch training as well. And then while they are pitching, there will be a jury that will be voting on the pitch quality, the innovation, the impact, and the investment readiness. And then the summary of the jury's evaluation will lead to 2 awards that will be given in the closing ceremony.
So as we speak right now, there are CEOs of companies across Scandinavia with a stopwatch timing their...
Yes, we hope.
And in terms of what companies, obviously there are going to be winners and losers, does it get narrowed down, or does it just, this is the winner?
So the way that the voting works, it's a point-based system based on very specific criteria, ranking the different categories that I mentioned. So it will come down to the top 2 scores amongst those 40 companies.
And what are the benefits that those 2 companies can expect if they are chosen?
We're not disclosing the award quite yet, but I can say that it will be cash plus a package.
The other ones, is there anything that you do for them?
Well, I feel like that's a lot of what we've tried to do already. So I think the most difficult thing as an early stage company is to, number one, get in front of an investor, but number 2, get in front of the right investor. So there's a couple of things that we've done besides just marketing the companies directly to all the investors. We've also collected summary information on every single one of the firms coming. So getting an idea of their strategy, their therapy area, their sector interest, their ticket size. And then we've shared that information with all 40 companies so that they can learn how to pre-screen the intelligent capital that they should be looking for. Because as we know, a dollar sign is not a dollar sign. So they get to come to the conference for free. They get to meet these investors directly. The investors ideally already know who they are and have pre-screened them. And then they have a better understanding of how to continue investor dialogues when they leave the event.
I would imagine also a benefit for the investors because it's kind of like a pre-screening almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so one of the things I will say is that we've also tried to highlight as sort of a side benefit. In the Nordics, we have innovation programs in Finland and Norway, now starting up in Denmark as well, called Spark. Spark originated in Stanford in 2006 as an innovation program to help commercialize academic research with high commercial potential. So we have a number of academic teams that are coming to the conference as well. So we've also collected the one-pagers from Spark programs and provided those to the investors as well. Because the main thing for our investors is we want to make sure that they see that we have a breadth of opportunities across not just a portion of the Nordics, but all 5 Nordic countries, across all therapy areas, across all sectors, including academia. And we want them to feel invested in our ecosystem, invested in knowing our investors, invested in understanding how we operate, both logistically and culturally. So I think that this has shown, I mean, traditionally we've had around 30 to 40 investment groups that are regular attendees at NLS Days, but this year, as I mentioned, we have more than 80. So there are 40% of those are international investors, non-Nordic, and hopefully that leads to some positive outcomes.
One company that will be in attendance is AstraZeneca. While the company needs no introduction, it was an opportunity to hear what NLS Days means to both AstraZeneca and to other companies, and who better to chat with about that than someone who's been involved with the event all along, and that's Magnus Björsne, CEO of AstraZeneca's BioVentureHub.
You have the BioVentureHub. I wonder if you could tell me about that.
So the BioVentureHub is an initiative that we launched back in 2015. And in short, the idea is whether it would be possible to apply the philosophy of the sharing economy to industry. So we wanted to basically find a model that would allow us to utilize economy of scale in a large organization like AstraZeneca and combine it with the flexibility that we have with respect to resource utilization. And in such a way that we could make human capital and infrastructure available to support growth companies. And after discussions with Vinnova, the Swedish Innovation Agency, we launched a private-public partnership with the government, which basically allowed growth companies to physically move into AstraZeneca and take part of both infrastructure, facilities, and even instruments, but foremost being able to get in dialogue with our experts. Some people argue we have replaced venture capital with domain expertise as a currency. And since we launched the hub, roughly plus 55 companies have moved in. Physically, today there are 35 companies in the hub. It's a couple of things that makes this environment quite unique. The first one is the fact that AstraZeneca holds no rights. The second thing is that it's a portfolio that is basically aiming towards supporting sector convergence. So we have IT companies, we have tech companies, we have traditional biotechs, and we have diagnostic companies. And we call this the 4D. So it's drugs, devices, digital, and diagnostics. Further on, it's not an environment for startup companies. There is a lot of good environments to initiate venture growth, as to speak. But what we realized is that when a company moves from the R into the D dimension, i.e. going from research to development, a lot of the skills that they need sits in industry, and it is normally skills that they don't possess themselves. So we thought that if we could really allow them to tap into our knowledge when it comes to development and commercialization, it will add a tremendous value. That was the belief. And it is also, I think, unique in a sense that we don't aim at bringing in companies that has a product that is of interest to us. And this may sound a bit odd at a glance, but it has turned out to be quite clever, because by having a philosophy of non-competition, not only between us and the companies in the hub, but also between the companies in the hub, it really paves the way for openness. So the whole currency here is knowledge. And we have a saying which is dare to share. And if you put that into a system, it becomes both cost efficient, but foremost, it gives you access to competence that is very hard to access elsewhere. So that is in short what the BioVentureHub is. So it is a platform. For us, it allows us to explore new technology in a very risk mitigated way. And for the companies, it gives them access to the knowledge that sits within an organization like AstraZeneca. It's a pure win-win. And I think the challenge for the industry at the moment is that all big pharma has moved beyond the pill. So the products of the future will not be medicines in isolation. It will be medicines combined with different types of technology. And this means that the areas we need to explore are much wider than we are used to. And the second aspect, which has turned out to be very, very important, is the fact that the business logics, they don't marry between these different sectors. To give you an example, when we talk to an IT company and tell them it will take 8 years to reach the market, they will leave the room. Their technology will probably be obsolete in 3 years' time. So we need to find new ways to co-innovate with these type of organizations, which are having a different business culture, basically. And that's what we try to promote in the BioVentureHub. Another way to articulate it is that it is an environment that allows us to be a bit more brave. Normally what we do in industry when we engage in partnerships is to create a business case. And that business case at some point tells you what the return on investment is. It's either expressed as a risky present value or whatever way you choose. But irrespectively of method, what it means is that you have tried to predict the outcome of the endeavor even before it starts. And if we believe that disruptive innovation will be critical for our sector, it's not a good method because we basically disqualify anything we don't understand nor can predict. So the hub is really a way to allow for organized skunk work that could pave the way for those insights that is required in order to have the guts to engage, basically.
Sounds really interesting. Is it a model that you can see being replicated in other locations?
Both yes and no. So we have tried to build environments according to this philosophy elsewhere, but it has actually not been successful. And mainly because, I mean, people sometimes joke and say the Nordics are very naive. And I think we have used that naivety here. Because, for example, in US, you have a very different legal culture. What would happen if we give advice to a company and it turns out to be wrong? You could imagine that it could end up in some kind of a lawsuit. If you move east, there is a very different type of competitive environment between both companies and individuals. It's not easy to launch a dare to share mentality if you go east. So I think it builds a lot on the Nordic collaboration culture, and we try to use that as a competitive advantage in this setting. But it has been done in other industries. So, for example, we worked with ABB, so they are in power supply and robotics. We help them to build a similar environment in their industry sector. So it's sector agnostic, but it's not culturally agnostic, put it that way.
Have there been any great success stories in the hub?
I mean, since this is funded by the government, it has been a lot of attention trying to realize, is it worth doing these type of private-public partnerships? So we have worked a lot with the School of Economics during the whole period, actually, to try to understand what type of value does these type of investments generate? And the way the scholars have looked at it is from two perspectives. They talk about value creation, and that is value for anybody but AstraZeneca. So it's value for the nation, it's value for the companies, what have you. And I think there we have been able to tick all boxes. And we have made basically research to look at the monetary growth in the portfolio. And it is evident that, yes, companies that are here has been very, very successful. We don't have a placebo group, so of course we can't know how they would have performed elsewhere. But what we see is that it is very distinguished from index. Then the second value description is what is called value capture, and that is the value for AstraZeneca. And they divide that into hard and soft values. And I think all the soft values we have been able to generate. I mean, to have 35 entrepreneurial companies inside AstraZeneca, it impacts our culture. It allows us to recruit people in a different way, even though it goes as it should in both directions. It increases density of competence at the site. So today the hub is 270 people. So it's quite a substantial proportion of the R&D site in Gothenburg. When it comes to the hard values, we have entered a lot of collaborations, but I think the main purpose when we started this was not, I mean, we wanted to go from an ecosystem to an ecosystem because we believe that long term it will pay off. We have today actually launched products together with companies in the hub, but it is really about Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 type of initiatives. The stuff that we always say, it's too early, let's wait and see what happens. This allows us to engage earlier. It allows us to influence those programs in a way that we, rightly or wrongly, believes makes sense.
Changing tack to NLS Days, could you tell me what the involvement is with the company in NLS Days?
I think NLS Days, I mean, I've been engaged in NLS Days for many, many years because I really believe it is a super valuable platform, both foremost for the SMEs that gets an opportunity to get in contact with both large corporations and also investors. I mean, we are all in synergy here and we are dependent on each other. And I think it is a platform that really focuses on the Nordic assets, as to speak. I also think it's the size. I mean, if we go to the US bio meetings with 20,000 people, it becomes very anonymous. I think NLS Day with plus 1,000 people is a perfect size for a meeting like this. So it's important for all people there. And I think, to me, it serves a lot of purposes. And I mean, especially now post the pandemic when we haven't met. So I think the social aspect of meeting physically at NLS Days is, to me, very, very critical. I mean, science is a contact sport. You need to meet people. That's when you get ideas, and that's when move things forward. So to me, yes, it is a partnering meeting, but it is also an event where I think the organization behind NLS Days really tries to mix business interests with pure science and even understanding the Swedish way of working, because it's not only Swedes at the meeting, of course, it's people from all over Europe and outside.
How useful is it, do you think, to companies within the Nordic region, especially because there's going to be representation from Asia, the US?
Sweden and the Nordics, if you look on innovation indexes, the Nordic countries score among the best in the world, but the amounts of investments made in Sweden doesn't correlate to our ability to innovate. And I think we need to be much better at communicating the quality of our science and the quality of our innovation. And NLS Days is the platform that allows us to expose that science to the outside world. And if you look on valuations today, I think to me, it's surprising that people hasn't realized that it's a bargain to make a deal with a Nordic company today compared to the valuation in the US market, for example.
Okay, great. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I think I would like to say that if you haven't already signed up, you should do it. It is the occasion to meet.
I'm very much looking forward to being there. What are you looking forward to from the event?
The BioVentureHub is in quite a unique situation. We have been full for the last 3 years. We haven't been able to move any companies on board, any new companies. And now with the build of GoCo Health Innovation City close to us, we are now for the first time able to move out the companies that have basically grown out of the BioVentureHub. So during the spring, we will be able to bring in a lot of new companies. And I think NLS Days is a perfect platform to announce that.
This week there were some big biotech announcements in the US, with President Biden echoing President Kennedy's moonshot, only this time with biotech. And so to analyse it a little for us and give us some more details in our weekly chat is Travis McCready. And because I'm always having technical issues with recording conversations, maybe I should say this. We choose to go to JLL, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. Hi, Travis.
Hey, Jim. It has been a busy week here in the United States for the life sciences. With the 60th anniversary of former President Kennedy's famous "We choose to go to the moon" speech as a backdrop, President Biden made key announcements about a number of new policy and initiatives, which he calls his cancer moonshot, designed to sustain the nation's growth and leadership in the life sciences sector. Perhaps the most significant was the creation of a new national biotechnology and biomanufacturing initiative that Biden says will ensure that the U.S. can make in the United States all that we invent in the United States. It's a $2 billion initiative which follows over $250 million in biomanufacturing grants that were already awarded earlier this month through a separate initiative called the Build Back Better Regional Challenge. So this is a initiative which is, I think, significantly unlike the Obama era focus on biomanufacturing that was intended to stimulate biomanufacturing innovation. Biden's approach seems to be more focused on economic growth and nationalism. U.S. biomanufacturers will welcome the focus, in part because novel areas like regenerative medicine are significantly under capacity. And from a commercial real estate perspective here at JLL, we're certainly seeing that GMP manufacturing infrastructure is in very high demand. So when you factor in the need for everything from engineering innovation, workforce development, and more pandemic supply chain resiliency, I guess you could say that biomanufacturing has earned this spotlight level of federal attention. Also in the news, During the same announcement, President Biden announced his choice to lead the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, or ARPA-H for short. Dr. Renee Wegersen will be coming on board with a $1 billion budget to start ARPA-H and breathe new life into federally funded translational health research. Dr. Wegersen comes to the position from Cambridge-based microbiome juggernaut Ginkgo Bioworks, and she has her work cut out for her in establishing ARPA-H's identity separate and distinct from the National Institutes of Health, which is, of course, the nation's single largest funder of life sciences research. One exciting distinction to watch will be the degree to which ARPA-H funds not only early-stage startup activity in biotech and medtech, but also delves into areas that have not received funding, like public health entrepreneurship and social determinants. Lastly, the White House resolved a decades-old conflict about publishing of scientific research by mandating public accessibility of the fruits of all federally funded research. Those pesky paywalls that currently prevent access will be gone by 2025. U.S. federal funded research makes up about 9% of the 2.9 million papers published globally each year, so this new policy could spur life sciences innovation simply by improving shared access to knowledge and ideas. All in all, while Biden's announcements may have lacked the galvanizing call to action that President Kennedy achieved 60 years ago, it is clear, however, that the cancer moonshot tried to be goalpost to goalpost, to use an American football analogy, by spurring activity across the entire idea generation, translation, commercialization, and manufacturing life cycle. Time will tell just how effective those efforts will be. Thanks again, and I will see you next week, Jim.
Thanks, Travis, for that, and I appreciate Kennedy's speech about the moon had a little bit more impact than mine at the beginning there. We'll talk to you again next week. Travis McCready is the leader of JLL's Life Science Markets Advisory practice in the Americas, working closely with the global and scaling life sciences companies, developers and investors to achieve breakthroughs. He has more than 25 years of experience spearheading successful ventures related to technology and innovation, including as president and CEO of a $1.6 billion life sciences funding agency. And that's it for podcast number 14. I've got lots of interviews to choose from next week, and we also have a preview of Bio Europe in the coming weeks as well. Plus, I'm going to have to record podcast number 16 a little bit early because the time it comes out, I'll be on a plane back from Denmark to Edinburgh to arrive just in time for the road home to be full of traffic. I get the feeling it's going to be pretty busy right through to the end of the year. Speaking of busy, we're about to put out our first special newsletter in a couple of weeks, and I have 2 videos to edit for that, so I'll go and try and do that, and no doubt get distracted by 100 other things instead, one of which is the schools being off today. So thank you for listening, and I hope wherever in the world you are that you have a great week ahead, and you'll join us again next time for another Beyond Biotech.